Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight to hear the debut of Shayne's historic map of Fairview Township. For those of you who don't know about the Western Historical Society, just briefly, I'm Janice Links, I'm the executive director. Here tonight, we also have our president, Don Paul Shearer, you can wave, and our vice president, Kurt Harlicker is here, and our secretary, Warren Sprinkle. We represent 7 municipalities on the West Shore. We currently have a very nice arrangement with Cumberland County Historical Society, where we're basically representing them on the West Shore. So I'd like to acknowledge their executive director, Lindsay Varner, is here tonight with us. And we're very grateful for all the staff at CCHS who helped us in so many ways over the last months. And now here we have Shayne. Shayne Reed is director of the West Shore Historical Society. He is our youngest member. We're very happy to have him. I believe you joined us in 2023.
Yes.
Yes. At that time, Fairview Township had just become one of our municipalities that we represent. And we had put a little article in the Fairview newsletter. And I was contacted by Shayne, at which point he started to tell me all about his map of Fairview. And after several meetings, and we got to know him, we asked him to join our board. So he's going to tell you all about himself. I'm not. So I'd like to introduce Shayne Reed. Thank you. And Mike is on.
All right. This. How's everyone doing tonight? Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it, especially on a Monday. I'm really excited to actually finally show this map. I've been working on it for like 2.5 years, and although it will never truthfully be done because you can always find more information, it's nice to finally get it out to the public. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have lived in Fairview my whole life. I found out that my family had been in Fairview Township for a little over 200 years, even before it was even called Fairview. I've always had a fascination with history, whether that's just American history to ancient history to genealogy, just all aspects. I attended Harrisburg Area Community College and Marshall University. And I have a professional background in data analytics, compliance, and marketing, which I do believe helped my project. So when I was at Marshall, I was working with ArcGIS, which is a mapping application. It's extremely helpful and pretty much industry standard. It's what everyone uses. But what I wanted to do was I wanted something that was easy to use for everybody and just something that like everyone pretty much had in their pocket or easy access on their computer. So I wanted to use Google Maps. So what I started with this project was, as a basis, I used the Shears map of York County. This was my basis for the entire project. I overlaid it with the Google Maps current map, and I drove around to all the properties to make sure that they were still standing, and I also used Google Street View to make sure that was the case as well. And I also wanted to make sure that, you know, they did not tear down a property and build a completely new one, so even though one should be there, it was a completely different one. So I used this as a basis, and I documented the property. So I just started by putting little bullet points on here and markers. And then I actually went and did some research. So one thing I also did was I went around and found all the schoolhouses. So we will kind of start with that here, and we'll kind of dive into it. So one thing you were all provided with, and that is back there, if you didn't grab it, is a legend. This will also be on the website as well. But it just shows what each marker is and what it means. So we'll just do with the school marker here, just so we can kind of get this started. And also, I do apologize. This is not my laptop, and how I have things set up at home is a little different. So I do apologize. Things are a little slow on here. But one of the properties I clicked on here was a schoolhouse, and this was the Crossroads School. I went and I also tried to find the oldest picture I could. I believe this one is from the 40s, I do have it cited in the bottom here. But essentially, once you click on one of these markers, I have all the data that I have found on it and where I got that information, and I also have the address. I gave all the information I could find, so you can scroll through it and just read about each individual property. So this one's just talking about all the schools in the area, what's standing, and I gathered that information. I think it was from 1885, I believe, is when that was written. And also I cited the photo there. One of the other reasons I got started with this project was I was doing genealogical history. So I'll kind of start with this too. I feel like that is a good application for this. So let me zoom in here. Let's see who wants to cooperate. All right, awesome. So when I was looking at this map here, I knew a little bit about my family's history, and I got back to a James L. Reed. So when I first started looking at this map, the only thing I was really looking for was, all right, I want to find a James L. Reed and confirm that that is indeed my ancestor. So I found him pretty much dead center here. Now they put him as JL. I did eventually confirm that was him. He kind of went by his initials, but I found him right here. So then I went to Google Maps and I found that property. It's kind of hard to see on here, but you can see the road outline here. It's kind of that weird shape, matches this one exactly. And I overlaid it in GIS, but I don't have this on this particular laptop here. So I found that. I found the exact property. Let me see how far I can zoom with this. And I made sure that it was still standing. It still had the barn, it had the spring house, and it had a little bit of the outline of the original house. It has been expanded upon, but it still has part of the original. So if you select this, I have at least, I tried, when I put the name on the property, I tried to find the oldest person who originally had that property. But in this case, it's James L. Reed. So I have information like when the spring house was built in 1738. The barn is from the 1840s, at least verified by that map. And then I go through and I have a blurb about information about this particular person and where I got that information. So if you're doing genealogy, one thing that I think is neat with this map is you can read all about that person, but it also gives you a sense of their community and their life. Because in here it will talk about the church that they attended, which is on this map. Back then it was called the Stone Church, which is right down here. It's now Salem United Brethren, but they called it the Stone Church, and it's actually the oldest church in the Fishing Creek Valley there. But you can see where they went to church. You can see where they worked. I found out that eventually he started teaching at a school that he helped build, which was that Crossroads school right up here on the corner. And you just get a real sense for their life and also the people around them, the people that they communicated with. And a lot of the times, if you're going back this far, a lot of those people are relatives. So if you're really big into genealogical history, this will really help you with your search. Some ones like one here, I do have question marks, and that is basically, I do know it is an older property, at least from the 1800s, but I could not find any sources, whether it just wasn't time to find all of these, or I legitimately just couldn't find them, which is part of the reason too. I think it's neat that we can get this map out into the community. So if people do have information on the property, they can either reach out to me or just have their own research and get that put in here. One other thing I found out as well, and I thought was interesting, is just finding important people who live in your area that you never even knew about. So pretty much right next to where I grew up, I found out that there was an artist that lived in an old blacksmith shop. And his work is actually at the State Museum of Pennsylvania. But he was an artist in the 1940s, and he did a lot of paintings, and a lot of the artwork he had too was in Fairview Township. I will see if this link works. I was having trouble with it earlier here. Okay, here we go. Let me get this up here. Here we go. Little hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit. Okay, that's not going to work. Back in here. Okay, you can at least see it's like at least an outline of a church and then the gravestone here. And I thought that looked familiar, and what I found out was, again, going back to my map here, that was the church right here, the Crossroads Church. It was painted right in front of there, and everything is still there today, which I thought was very neat. Another thing too is preservation that this map can be used for. A lot of the times in local communities, something will be old and they will know a little bit about it, but that's about the extent of it, whether it's just an old schoolhouse and a developer will come and buy the property and then they're just going to tear it down. The community's like, hey, we do value this, we want it up, we know it's old, but that's it. So if someone wants to do some research to try and, prove that, it's either historical or valuable to be kept, a lot of the times it's too late because people want to kind of get moving. And also I do know that just because something's old doesn't mean it's necessarily historic, but this at least gets a good start here. And I'll kind of have an example of that here. So let's just say there was that schoolhouse Hickory Grove that just got torn down. Which yet again, it was too late. People didn't have information on it. But if they had a map here, they could have went right to Hickory Grove. They would have all the information on the schoolhouse that they could provide to the developer or the township to try and get it saved. Excuse me, my voice is dry. I'm a musician. I play in front of a ton of people. And I'll tell you, I'm more nervous for this than I am playing shows. I don't know why it is. Just something about it. This is my baby. But unfortunately, this schoolhouse was something that we could not save. But like I said, if this map would have been completed, someone could have just pulled this up and at least had some information to provide. Another thing that I think is valuable about this is just, yet again, the visualization. You can really get a sense of kind of like what I was saying earlier with the community. You can get a sense of the people that live there and just everything that goes on. And you can look at like kind of different eras too, like whether it's from the 1840s, 1850s, and so on. I have links in here attached to like agricultural censuses. So you can even see what the community was growing at a certain time of year. And it just kind of adds to that sense of place, which I think is really important. Another thing too, which I personally like to do and just kind of do like the tours that they have like Gettysburg, driving around all the different properties. This is something you could also do on your own with this map. Since it's Google Maps, you can just select a location and just directions, and it will take you right to it. And you can add stops. So if you just kind of wanted to, I want to visit all the schoolhouses in Fairview Township, you can click on each one, click add stop, and you can just do that loop. So you can kind of make your own tours on it. And then it has the information on here so you can read it when you kind of get to that location. Which is really neat. That's something that I personally really enjoy. One thing that I do think is very important is sources. So I thank you for the halls. I really need that. One thing I thought the tea might help, but halls are going to do it here. All right. Okay. But yeah, I think sources are very important because people can just kind of say anything. So anything I have in here, I at least tried to back up. And if you click on any of these properties, you can go right to that. Yeah, excuse me, I'm really sorry about my throat here. I did also add a cemetery in here. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Find a Grave, but it lists everyone who was buried at that location. So this has all the cemeteries that are in Fairview Township. You can select any of them and click on it. So we'll just pick Mount Olivet here, because that's where most of my family's buried. But you can click it and you can just search through and just read through the names if you wanted. Or if you kind of know your person, so we'll go with James here from earlier. It'll show you all the information that they have. And a lot of this information that's in here is things that I added as well, but yes. Okay, so one thing I think that I kind of want to see accomplished from this is yet again some more local buildings protected. I think that would be great. It kind of preserves the area. Another thing is I think it would be cool if people would be able to use this if they're like buying a home. They would already be able to have the information that goes way more in depth than what like a seller would have. Especially if that person wasn't left anything from the previous owner. They can kind of see, you know, the 1800s who lived there, and in succession, and maybe even have old pictures that can be provided. I'd like to see, you know, different other historical societies kind of sort of use Google Maps, because yet again, I think just the ease of use is very nice, and it's just accessible to the public. And then the community involvement. This ultimately is a community project. You know, I know a lot of these pictures are out there. I know people have stories to tell, and I know they have documents, but if people aren't aware, then we're never going to get that information. One other thing I'm going to share on here, this was a marker that I have one color for because I didn't know what to make it, but I still wanted to include it. Can't take a big swig of tea. Okay. I found the voting place, which is hard for me to do because I wasn't around when that place was built. But I did find the location of it, but I found out the voting place in Fairview Township was called Bunches. And I found the location of where it was. This is the only case in the map of where I put something down that was not there, just because I thought it was a valuable resource. But it was also a tavern called Grey Horse, which I don't know if any of you are familiar with. And it also went by Cedar Lodge, and then lastly was Jackson's Junction. But that was the voting place. There's also like different articles in here about how like apparently there was a powwow doctor there at one point, which I thought was very interesting. Yeah, there's so much you can do with this map. It's just a great tool for whether it's genealogical research, preservation, just getting a sense of community, and it's kind of to wanting to know what's around you. Does anybody have any questions at this moment in time? Yes.
Yeah, so one of your angles, I guess, is the historical preservation of buildings. Has the West Shore organization attempted that yet, I guess? Found a building outside of this program here.
As far as buildings, there was an attempt with the Hickory Grove Schoolhouse, but with a bridge, yes. And that's something I know Janice would love to talk about that all day, but
The bridge. Is it on the cover of the
but yeah, it's the Sheepford Road Bridge. And I also have a lot of bridges in here as well. So you can view all the bridges that are still standing, but that is one that was protected by our society.
Do you know what the process is to preserve a building? You find out it's historical and they are part of it, tear it down?
That I personally do not, but I do with that is Janice would definitely be able to help with that. But we do have people here that can definitely assist. But like I said, with something like this, I think the best resource for it is just kind of a great jump start. Because a lot of times people are scrambling. It's like, how do you even find this information? You know, you have to either go to archives, and it doesn't even necessarily mean you're going to find something. You have to search online, but if you don't even know what something's called, how are you going to find it? Like the Hickory Grove Schoolhouse. How would I know it's called Hickory Grove? Because there's no sign on it, like there's nothing. So even if you're searching for it like online, it doesn't necessarily mean you're even going to find it. So having a resource like this is a great head start, because someone could click on like, oh, Hickory Grove, then you can even start down that rabbit hole of searching. Which I think is again, I just think it's a valuable resource to be able to utilize. And then, you know, like I said, with pictures, I think that's another big aspect of it. Is like all these schoolhouses I was able to find pictures for. So if you select any of them, they will come up. But that's something I'd like to have for as many things as I can, but it's very tough to be able to find pictures, especially get them verified. Because, you know, sometimes I'll find pictures and it'll be from Fairview, but I don't know what I'm looking at because it wasn't written on the back or anything. It's just kind of a picture. I know there's some farmhouses here that they do have older pictures, and typically they're hung up in the home. So obviously that's up to the homeowner's discretion if that's something they would want to share, but I have found that people have provided those. And another thing I provided too, let me go back to my links here. So doing my research, I got in touch with the Redland Area Women's Club, and I found out that in the 80s, they already did a ton of research by going to the state archives and doing old home research. So they provided me with their research, so I have that in here as well. This is a tremendous document. If you get time later, you should definitely look through this. I'll give you some highlights here. Now I'll kind of show you how they set it up. Okay. So they took a picture of the property at the time that they visited, if they didn't have an older picture. But all the properties that they researched go back to when William Penn had the land and sold it all. So any of these properties that are sold, you can literally trace it back to William Penn, which I think is really neat. And I think there's about 30 some of those properties that are documented in this map. You know, and yet again, I just think that visual resource is great. Because a lot of times for me, you know, if I'm looking, it's like, I know where that property is, but I don't know what it would be called. And I don't know how to research, but I know what road it's on. You know, so you can just go to this map, you can select it and be like, oh, there's already that information in here. But yeah, like I said, in the legends, I just listed all of my sources, whether it's agricultural censuses, graves. I even have aerial photographs from 1937 here. Let's see how all this will work. So with this, you can view this is from 1937. And it looks like by that shape, that would be, I kind of know by shapes, which is kind of strange. But looking at this map so much, it's like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. So there. Yeah, we're right here. Okay, so let me go back to where that was. So yeah, you kind of see this shape here. You can be like, okay, this is what the layout of the land looked like in 1937, and you can kind of view that with the map here. Because most of the roads, like all the main roads, are pretty much the same. They have not changed even from the 1800s. So it's truthfully pretty easy to follow along, just because there's not really any big changes. Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions?
So this is from Google Maps.
Yes.
How does somebody that's coming into the area find this map or even know? Is it part of the search engine? I mean, you obviously have a link on the paper here, but other than coming through the Historical Society website, can they Google search it and find it or use it? Or?
It would be on the Historical Society website, but you would be able to Google search it. Now, I haven't played around with a bunch of different ways of searching, so I guess it depends on the exact terminology that is used, which I might have to kind of mess around with. That way I can make sure that if people try a variety of things, they can find it. But yes, it can be searched.
So if we had information that could be added, we can submit it to you.
Yes, you can send it to me or just the West Shore Historical Society in general, and it will get to me. But this is also something that anyone can take and kind of add their own. Now, this specific map, no one can change except for me. But the one cool thing about Google Maps as well is you could like download this map, and if you wanted to add your own things to it, you can. Now, what would kind of help is if it's along the same lines and getting in that community aspect, we can build a map together. But if someone on here wanted to add something different that doesn't necessarily fit with what this is, they could do that as well. It kind of allows for that flexibility.
And the categories you have listed here, is there a particular category that has been the most challenging for you to find information on?
Yes. I would honestly just say the farmhouses, just because again, there's houses. So the only way for me to really research that was I would have to go down to the state archives. And yeah, plus with my 9 to 5, they're pretty much only open when I work. So it makes it very difficult for me to research it because there's nothing online. And so the only way to access it is to actually go there. The other ones, for the most part, I was able to find all online. I really had to do some digging though, but I could find it. But that was something that I could. You had to essentially go there.
Your black marker, is that just for things that are in lime film or is that?
Like just the lime kiln. Like, and there's only, yeah, I guess it's the other thing that's just one, is the lime kiln. And what I kind of might want to change the wording on this because I just have a question mark. But that is, I know it's older, but I don't have any sources for it. It kind of makes it, now that I'm looking at it, I guess I did kind of put a little blurb here, but I might want to change that up a bit. But I still wanted to include it that way if someone wanted to do the research themselves, they still have it. And they at least know the location and then they know the address. So it's easier to do the research on. They're not stuck with, starting from scratch. It's at least something.
Shayne, can you point out some of your favorite properties in Fairview besides your old homestead there?
Yes.
Is there a couple of things you came across that would be particularly interesting to the audience?
Yeah. So one of the things was a tavern I found. I have a link here too, but it's Moore's Mountain Inn. But that's actually the oldest tavern that is in Fairview Township. It was built in 1798. I thought that was very neat to learn. I never knew that. And then I also found a tavern as well that was built in 1860, right in Pleasant View, which is kind of right by Roland High School. I thought that was neat because from my understanding, I did not think that there was any alcohol in the township back then, but I was definitely mistaken. So that was something that I thought was interesting to learn. Yeah, I guess I'm going to kind of go back to this as well because I didn't finish mentioning, but that Bunch's Tavern and Voting Place. When I was reading an old newspaper clipping, I found out that it was called bunches because the guy that owned it had a bunch on his back. Whatever that means, I don't really know. But they just decided to call it bunches. And I have the newspaper clipping in here as well if you wanted to read that. Let's see. Up here. Oh, yes. So one thing that was really hard for me to find was this one cemetery. Let me get down to it here. I can't really say I discovered it because it is on Find a Grave, but it's not under Fairview Township. But it's back in here. So it's off Pleasant View Road, but it's behind these warehouses, and as far as I'm aware, it's not really accessible. I mean, I guess it has to be. I do actually plan on making a trip out there, but it's like right back in the woods here, and there's like no path to get to it. Now, someone did take pictures, and it is not taken care of at all. I have the coordinates on here because you can't really drive to it. But there's 14 graves that are there, and they're not taken care of. Like this person was buried here in 1794. Like it's probably one of the oldest grave sites in the township. But a lot of these you can't even read. So I kind of want to make it out there at some point, but it's just how inaccessible that place is. And if I wouldn't have done my mapping project, I would have never known it was back there, and I doubt anyone else does as well. It's just kind of forgotten. So that was another really interesting thing I found. But yeah. Any other questions?
You had a marker, one of your markers earlier, Edward Shippen. What was his claim to fame up here?
Well, let's see here. You see Edward Shippen?
Edwin.
Edwin. Okay. Here we go. That's another thing as well I want to highlight. On the side here, if I have it listed, you can control or search and then select it if you see it. But for him, let's see here.
Is the backstory.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. It doesn't seem like there's anything other than the land that was obtained by him from the past. So it doesn't even appear that he built anything. Yeah, it says 2 months later he sold it from when he bought it. Was someone earlier said Brenneman? Was someone here mentioning that earlier when I was talking? I thought I heard that.
That's gotta be a better name than Barry. Were you able to locate Liberty Forge? And then, is that in Fairview?
They might just. Yeah.
Oh, that's low around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can click on in the very middle. I put this here, so it'll give you the outline of the township. And I think that's probably great. Yeah, so it looks like it's Liberty Forge Ridge, so it's like just outside of the boundary. But,
Where's great? Is that Fairview? Wrong side of the creek.
so yeah, Fairview is the one that's like highlighted. Everything else is kind of like a light gray. That's on the side of it. Everything in that that's like lit up.
It's dark, the dark green, it's a dark green Fairview.
You said dark green? That, let me see.
With the outline, that was Fairview.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you meant a specific place called Dark Green. Yes, that outline there, that is specifically Fairview. But yes, and with this map too, since it's also mixed in with modern day, you can kind of see what it's around. You're not looking at like an 1860.
That's, so, I mean, ultimately, this thing's scalable. You go into Lower Allen Township, and
Yes.
you go across all, everywhere, really.
Yeah, so I've already started with New Cumberland myself, just for fun. But yes, ultimately, I want to try and get as many places as I can. It's a rough outline and get started, but yeah, it can be done anywhere. Which is that's the exciting thing. So you can really expand upon this if you wanted. So I really want to try and get as much of the West Shore as I can, but because I'm personally in Fairview, that's kind of where my heart lies. That's why I started with this. But yes.
If your family goes back to where you were,
Well, I had no idea. It was just kind of like let's start doing my genealogy history, and then one thing led to another, and you kind of find that out. And then
was your family mortgaged land by the Pens?
they were not, no, which is, you would think they would be, but no. But yeah, it got me started. I'm kind of like, I wanted to do what I did for myself for other people. Because I found a lot of joy in that. So I figured with this resource, anyone can enjoy it, but they have the ease of it. They don't have to go through, doing as much research, so it at least helps a little bit.
Shayne, you want to maybe comment on how long this has taken you so far? I'm not sure if you mentioned that.
So I've been working on this for 2.5 years. And at some point, I just kind of had to say, it's ready. It's never going to be done. You can always find out more information, and I'm sure there's properties I missed and just didn't find. But at some point I had to be like, it's done, and I wanted to get it out there, and I felt like now was a good time. Because I could sit on this forever, but that's not doing anybody any good. I wanted to make it accessible. But yeah, probably 2.5 years is what I spent on this. It was my full-time job, I probably had more done. Yeah, and the papers that you were handed, the link is on there. Is it also on our website yet?
It will be. It's
Will
not
be.
ready, but
Okay.
yes, it'll be added.
But at least for now, you can visit the link. The sheet is back there if you haven't grabbed it, and the legend is on there as well. You also have my contact information, so if you have any questions, I would love to answer. If you find anything out, you can email me, or if you know anybody that has any information that they'd like to provide, you can email me as well. But I'm always down to chat history or anything local you come across. This would be more than happy to talk about it. Yes.
Have you found any Civil War points? Normally, we don't think of Civil War in Fairview Township, but I think they travel back and forth between York and like Mechanicsburg. I don't know if you found any in the township.
I haven't. I mean, I found veterans, and I found their graves, but the only thing I really found pertaining to Fairview that was mentioned was during the Gettysburg campaign, where there was fear that they would get to Harrisburg. There was a newspaper article talking about how people were burying their valuables in their yard because they were worried that would be taken. But that is the only thing that was mentioned. So I guess if anybody has a metal detector and they get permission from one of these properties, I guess look for the biggest, oldest tree. Maybe you can find something. But that was the only thing I found.
What's that link for the Pennsylvania aerial?
That's going to be one. So when you go to the legend that's on there, actually, that's not listed on there, is it? It's just like a picture of the legend because we don't have it on the site yet, right? Let me get that here for you.
And Ben files historical photos.
Yeah. And eventually that will be on everything will be in one spot on our site when that is available. But like I said, the legend will eventually just look like this. That way you can just select what you want.
Probably gonna laugh. You had mentioned about a famous boxing match that happened. Was that in Fairview Township?
That was in Goldsboro.
That was in Goldsboro.
Yeah. You know about that, man.
$150,000 in 1850.
Yeah. Yeah, Goldsboro's on my list of places to do as well, so. But yes, there will be links in here. I even found, I'll show this as well. This is a great resource. But I found a gentleman who lived in Fairview and a little bit of Newbury. But he wrote his memories and recollections in from 1857 to 1907, and he talked to a lot of the people. So one thing you can do too is I can't guarantee they're in here, but there's a pretty good chance. But you could go into the map, find an individual. You could go back to Dr. Israel Betts's recollections, and he might have interviewed that person. So then yet again, you get a better sense of the community. Like I said, I can't guarantee that they're in there because the people that I was personally looking for were not, but there's a ton of people and a ton of different stories, and you get a really good sense of Fairview. He even mentioned that it would get so dusty from the roads. I mean, they were all dirt, which I know they kind of were everywhere, but he said for whatever reason, Fairview, he said he remembers it being really bad. It's really hard to kind of breathe when the horses were going by. I guess it was just more dusty than other areas. But yeah, it's really interesting reading what he remembers and interviewing people. Yet again, just it gives you a greater sense of the place, which is why I wanted to include all of that with the map.
You had mentioned that farmhouses are difficult to research and the state archives is helpful.
Yes.
What did you find with the state archives that you couldn't find at a historical society or some other local resource? What did you find there?
So it would just give you yet again who like William Penn sold the land to, and then it would just follows from there. Now there's a stopping point at some point, but you at least know who bought it, because if you're researching like who bought a property, I mean it's not really going to go back that far, especially if you're just like Google searching. You can maybe find out like who recently bought a property, but that's not going to be helpful in any way. So when you're doing this, you kind of work back and then go up. And that's a lot easier as opposed to finding out who owns it now and going back. You're really not going to get anywhere. So going to the state archives, that was really helpful. And they might even have pictures too, which I found interesting. They might have even done a survey, which is, if they did a survey on the property, that's extremely helpful. But then they would have pictures of the property and the exact survey lines and everything. It's really great. I wish I had more time to go. But yes, if you can make it out there to research, it's a great time.
Did you access anything with the PA share account?
Possibly. That sounds familiar. I am not quite sure though. What exactly is the PA share?
Was part of the Pennsylvania Museum Commission. And they have a lot of stuff online, but if you don't have a purchase membership, you don't get to see a lot.
Yeah. So that's one thing I try to, because one thing I get frustrated with if you're doing research is it seems like everything is locked behind a paywall. Like you have to pay for everything individually. If you want to look at old newspapers to research, you got to pay for that. If you want to do like genealogy, you got to pay for that. So you have to pay for everything. Eventually it adds up, especially if you're just doing this as like a hobby. It's like, wow, now we're getting into like, I don't want to spend a mortgage trying to, research Fairview, which is another reason I did this. Everything here is free and accessible, and all the links I have, you can just go right to it. You don't have to pay anything. But there is one other thing I wanted to mention. I want to add is you can do Google Street View, and I'll kind of give you one quick example here. For those unfamiliar, but so if you find a property, you can take this little guy here and it will take you right down to the street and you can see what it looks like today. So here I just kind of pictured that schoolhouse that I keep calling back to. Today it's a dentist office. One thing, I really like this street view. One thing I wanted to do was I found some pictures that the New Cumberland Library uploaded. They have 3 different pictures of just random locations in Fairview. I only found out where one was, and I got really lucky with it. But one thing I'd like to do is one of the other markers I want to add on the map is just like a little photo icon. So you can see exactly where like a picture was taken. So the one picture I found was of. It would have been on this house that was built in 1816. But I found a photo from the road. It wasn't necessarily a photo of just the house. They just wanted to kind of get the landscape. And it took me a while to actually find where that picture was taken, but I did. It just takes a lot of work because I have to kind of put pieces together and like, okay, well, that mountain kind of looks like this. Is that house still there? But I will eventually add photos like that to it. That's not just like a photo of just a house. It's like a photo of, you know, that specific location. You get the whole view when you know where that was taken. Any other questions?
Shayne, I was gonna mention that yesterday, coincidentally, I was here in Colorado, and I was talking to several people about old taverns. And I said to them that one of my favorites was the Long Tavern, very close to here. Two of my other favorites was Grey Horse, and of course, the old Jolly Coppersmith. And we were saying about two of them being in Fairview Township, and them being in Company Town. There's others that we lost, but they were three of the more quaint, tree pub type of taverns.
Yeah, and like I said, finding out that a powwow doctor was there was very interesting, which is why I listed that. And it has the article in here too. I'm gonna select that. But yeah, list where I found that article and where that location was. But yeah, it's just interesting finding the things that are right in your backyard. Just makes it a lot more interesting. You know, you kind of think you live in kind of like a rural area and it's, you know, it's kind of boring and can be quiet, which it can be, but you don't realize how much history is right in your backyard. And that's another thing I just wanted to provide. So even if you just kind of want to know, like, you know, who lived in the house next to me, like back in the 1800s, you can find that out. Just get a good sense of the place.
I don't know how, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question. What is the oldest still running business or active church, or was there any like thing on here that's still in existence in the way that it was then?
So there's a couple. I'll just give two examples. One is the well, trying to remember what it's called now, but it's the Stone Church or Salem United Brethren, oldest still standing church that was in the valley, and it was like the first stone one that was built in the valley in general. It was built in 1844. That is still there. And let me pull it up here. Let's use the street view. Okay. And it has some older pictures as well that you can view, but how it's set on this laptop, it's kind of hard to see. But this, obviously they've added on to it. You can see it's a lot bigger now. But this right here is the oldest still standing and operating church. Let me see if I can zoom in. I don't know if you can read that stone. Let me see. Yeah, you can. But it says in there was built in 1844. And then I think the oldest in general, let me get up to that here. Oldest, was the Ashton Hirsch House. But that's like the oldest building in Fairview. And it is on the National Historic Places Register. But there's not many that are, but that is one. I have a link here to it so you can go. Just the registration, and it has pictures on here as well. If it would cooperate, there you go. Let's see. Now if I can get it here. Try this. I have a PC at home that I use. It's a little different than these things, so I do apologize for the slowness here. And if it will load up here. And right here. This is kind of near Boomerang, and well, I guess it's not Bob Evans anymore. Well, that's a B&B, it's that.
It's online, we can road now.
Or.
Yeah. But yeah, that is the oldest building in the township. So there's a good amount that's still standing, like surprising. I wasn't expecting to find this many properties that were still standing. You would really think a lot of them would have been torn down, but a lot of them have been added on. Some of these schoolhouses are still around, but some of them have turned into homes and they built additions, same like farmhouses. So it's a surprising amount. People really didn't tear them down. They just kind of added on to it.
Even with the log homes, they did that.
Yeah.
You know, there's probably tons of them out there, but they've been covered up.
Yes, yes, and that's another, I think there's only like one or two that I found that you would never even really know that it was still the older part until you actually go into the house. And then you see that they kept the original log cabin part, but you would never know from the outside. That's kind of, yeah, can't really research that, but.
Well, interesting, puzzle of information, or like Zillow. Type in an address that would get up for sale, they might have a lot of photos.
Yeah, that's definitely a good resource as well.
Where people put a lot of money into a house or not.
Yeah. And I guess before we close out, is there any other questions that anyone has? And if you can't think of any now too, like I said, my email's on there, so please feel free. I'll happily answer any questions you have down the road. At any time. But yeah, I really do appreciate all your time, and thank you for checking this out. It means a lot to me. I really hope you enjoyed this resource. I hope you get as much out of it as I did, and I'll continually add to it. And yeah, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
From my perspective, he lost me and he drove around to all the sites to see which ones still existed. But there was a lot of work that went into it after that. And as I'm watching him, I've been familiar with the map now for a while, but just all the links to the other resources, having it all in one place, I think is really impressive. At least that's what impressed me. Just that there's so much information there, just in this, I'll say little mapping project, but we know it wasn't a little mapping project. So I appreciate everybody coming, like Shayne said before. I hope you took a copy of our newsletter, and my contact information was also on the handout, so always feel free to contact me at any time also. And thank you very much.
We like your message.